Warren,
Yes, I
correctly?
am.
Okay, cool.
So, hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm here with Sid from Wannabe Futurist. Sid's Twitter handle is in the description below. And we're going to be talking about vehicle to grid. We're also going to talk about mining. And we're going to talk about autonomous vehicle racing. Sid is, I'm going to read from the intro he sent me. He's trained as a mechanical engineer and has worked as an engineering consultant for several years serving mining companies. Then he got an MBA and he's now in management consulting. He's had an opportunity to work in various industries, including automotive. I'm skipping over some of the details.
No worries.
Forgive me, Sid. He has been a car lover for as long as he can remember. Hang on. Okay, he's been a car lover for as long as he can remember. Brief experience in racing and college driving with his school's Formula SAE cars. What's SAE stand for?
Society of Automotive Engineers.
Okay,
So
cool.
It was an organization that was created to catalyze innovation in automotive engineering. So colleges build their race cars in the pursuit of engineering improvements.
Okay, and he said these cars are fast. They can run on a 600cc motorcycle engine. 600cc motorcycle engine can go 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. With that context of gas-powered cars, I absolutely fell in love with the company, Tesla, in 2013 when I requested for a test drive of Model S P90D, and the rest was history. So, I've made a couple of videos in the past, in the not-too-distant past, where I dispute that vehicle-to-grid is going to happen, and those videos are both in the description below. And if you're interested in vehicle-to-grid, I'd encourage you to watch those videos. Sound is out of sync with video. Okay, Thaddeus says sound is out of sync with video. I don't know, Sid. I don't know, Thaddeus. I should be right. So, that's weird. Never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, I made 2 videos criticizing the concept of grid. I am outside the mainstream of the Tesla community. Thank you, Ben. I am outside the mainstream of the Tesla community. A lot of people in the Tesla community believe in vehicle to grid. And I kind of issued a challenge at one point to anybody who wants to come on and defend vehicle to grid to come on this, I guess we'll call it a podcast, and talk to me and explain to me why vehicle to grid will work. So, no problem, Thaddeus. So, Sid, I have put forward my position why I think vehicle to grid is dead, never going to happen, stick a fork in it. JB Straubel says no. Elon Musk has never said it's going to happen. What do you think about vehicle to grid, Sid?
Yeah. First things, most important thing. I mean, you got to be kidding, Warren. You're not an outsider in Tesla community. Like Elon just responded to you. So sorry, man. As much as you want to call yourself an outsider, your life has changed now. You're now an insider.
I just meant on the vehicle to grid issue, I'm an outsider.
All right. Okay, cool. So yeah, So a little bit of background on my experience with vehicle to grid, right? So I've worked as a management consultant, and like you said, my background is in engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I've been working as a management consultant for a while. And my first encounter with the technology of vehicle to grid was in form of some work that I did for one of my clients, who is an existing player in the space of vehicle to grid infrastructure in a country in the continent of Europe. That's all I'm going to talk about. And the work that we did was relative to expanding the existing infrastructure. And that was the problem statement, was not the feasibility of vehicle to grid. So that was out of the scope of my interest. But my personal interest was also to say, like, I've been a Tesla lover, EV lover for a long time now, since 2012, 2013. But I never heard of vehicle to grid. But when I was working on this project, it was like, okay, well, my job is to figure out a roadmap for them to expand. But like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But that was from the perspective of engineering limitations that we had relative to the battery packs, right? Cycle times and deterioration associated with connecting your car to the grid, et cetera, et cetera. So it didn't make sense, but hey, this is a project they want to ramp up, and we want to figure out the most efficient way to ramp up. So that my perspective on vehicle to grid started off being negative. And it kind of transitioned to really positive when there were, patent filings from Tesla and Jeff Dahn and I think a couple of other Tesla engineers or associated engineers with Tesla who filed technology that seemed promising to vehicle to grid. Now, disclaimer, I am not a chemical engineer. I'm not a battery expert. And I'm just relying on the commentary that I have seen relative to vehicle to grid patents. So my underlying assumption is that the technology is possible. Like, now let's talk about the feasibility, right? So my views shifted a little bit to pro vehicle to grid when I started seeing that, okay, the cycle time is not, the deterioration of the battery is not an issue, and the life of the battery is not anymore an issue, right? But I actually really loved your videos that you presented, which presented a contrarian argument on the economics behind using your vehicle to distribute the loads at a grid level, right? I really liked the argument, and I was torn. Really, I was like, wait, it made sense because until then, my only roadblock was the battery deterioration. But after seeing your videos, so once the patents were filed and the developments in battery technology happened, that roadblock lifted. And then once I saw your arguments, another roadblock came, economic roadblock. So I was like, okay, how can I figure this out? So I went down to thinking it from a first principle perspective. And I was like, okay, when I started to think, okay, to be able to figure out if this will be feasible or not, let's see what are some of the underlying powerful drivers from a Tesla's perspective, right? And so to make my argument, Warren, I think if you have that picture that I shared with you.
Yes, so I'm going to put this up. So I'm going to block my face and to some extent your face. I'll shrink it so it doesn't block your face.
No worries. So I think we don't have to have it's just to frame the narrative rather than having it all the time.
So the picture's up.
Oh, it's up? Okay, cool. So I'll pull something up on my end. All right, so my argument, so when I wanted to answer this to myself before you put down the challenge on Twitter, I wanted to resolve it for myself. Like, wait, now I'm torn. How do I resolve this? So I tried to think about it in like 5 different angles. First thing is simple. What is Tesla's mission? It's to accelerate the advent of sustainable energy, energy living. I'm sorry, I may be misquoting it, but the essence is to accelerate sustainable energy sources and
accelerate the transition to sustainable energy.
Sustainable energy. There we go. So that's that. And second, so
that's my religion now.
There you go. Yeah. So my first stop was, let's answer this question by isolating every other aspect of Tesla's business. If we isolate autonomy, if we isolate Powerwall, if we isolate cars itself, that's the concept of, from what we see in the world right now and what we see with Tesla's vehicle-to-grid technology, does that hinder or accelerate? Now, the magnitude of acceleration, we can argue about that, and I think that's where the core of your argument lies. That to me was, yes, vehicle-to-grid does enable acceleration of transition to sustainable energy. So that was a check. I put that aside. And then I've been a big proponent or big fan of stakeholder theory. And a little background on stakeholder theory is this was first proposed by 2 German economists, Hein Kruse and Klaus Schwab. Their argument was essentially that management of modern enterprise must serve not only shareholders, but also stakeholders. Sort of different to Milton Friedman's perspective on free market economy. And this is to achieve long-term growth and prosperity.
So who are the stakeholders aside from there's shareholders, customers, employees? Who else?
Yes, exactly. So stakeholders include employees, includes everything that you would think in a classic free market economics organizational structure. That is employees, creditors, shareholders. But stakeholder theory also includes a larger ecosystem of suppliers, local communities, cities, and citizens. who are not associated with the products that, it's, if you have a Tesla, you are a customer. But if I don't have a Tesla, I'm still impacted with the presence of Tesla as a company.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's take these one at a time. So let's start with company mission. My perspective, for those who aren't familiar with it, is I don't believe that vehicle to grid accelerates the transition to sustainable energy. Vehicle to grid maybe helps in some way participate in sustainable energy, but I don't think it accelerates it. So why do you think it accelerates the transition to sustainable energy?
So it's, again, I
can understand it plays a role in it, but how does it accelerate?
I think that's a good question, which would lead to explain some of the other pillars in my argument, right? So I think the reason why it is more important in today's world, having a resource like vehicle to grid, is because of environmental imperative, which is we are in a time crunch to make our resources as sustainable as possible, and make our investment return on our investment as high as possible. And I don't mean that only in sense of, okay, we need to use sustainable energy and whatnot. And to make that point, there's a good perspective to have. Yeah, we are in a world which is much more prosperous than 50 to 60 years ago, but we are also in an extremely volatile environment when it comes to how we operate, because of our supply chains being connected, because of our societies being connected. Like 1918 global pandemic, my ancestors are from India. They didn't know anything about the Spanish flu. we were trying to fight the British off from our country. So, but now this is the first time in the history of entire human civilization where we are all trying to fight a singular cause. And I think because of the reason.
Sorry, the singular cause is climate change?
No,
what's the singular cause?
Coronavirus, right?
Coronavirus,
I'm just trying to demonstrate the volatility in which we are living. So I was having this conversation with my roommate, and it kind of aided my perspective on the volatility, right? Because he.
Uh-oh. It looks like I've lost Sid. Sid, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, you froze for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. So
well, let me just follow up on what you were saying. So you were saying something about that we all have this shared mission now to deal with coronavirus, and that somehow the world is more volatile. But I'm still trying to get at this point where I agree that vehicle to grid has vehicles participating in the grid and in some way contributes to sustainable energy, but I don't agree that it accelerates the transition as compared to, at least not as compared to using vehicles as vehicles. So I'm just trying to get a feel for where's the acceleration.
The acceleration, so I don't think they're mutually...
Forget the word acceleration. How does vehicle to grid move us towards sustainable energy in a meaningful way compared to other options?
So that's the environmental imperative that I was talking about. So because of the volatility, there are externalities that our companies are facing on a day-to-day basis, which they didn't face 6 months ago. For instance, insurance premiums on small businesses and medium-sized businesses have gone up by 10 to 15% because of because I mean, obviously there's buckets where it impacts more, and there's buckets where it impacts less. But the fact that, and this was to basically talk about the impacts of increased volatility and increased volatility in our society. Although we are prosperous, the volatile incidents that happen in our world are extremely disruptive. And businesses that tend to prosper have a superior way of managing their costs. If they have a car to transport their employees, they're okay, and they have a really efficient way of operating. They have a successful business. But in a parallel universe, if they had their employees in their cars, which had vehicle to grid, they could use the vehicle-to-grid cars when the employees are not driving around doing their daily duties, to reduce the cost of a company.
Well, there's a scenario where you're a company. You have company vehicles and you have employees driving company vehicles. And while the employees are at the office or maybe at home, they plug their vehicles into the grid. And while they're working, their vehicles are supporting the grid. So that's a scenario where it might be helpful. I just want to because we're fairly 100%. Early in this live stream. I just want to say, for people who are new to the video, we're talking about vehicle to grid now. After we're done with vehicle to grid, we're probably going to talk about mining, because Tesla has real interests in mining. And then we're going to talk about racing, and in particular, whether autonomous vehicles could become race cars and what that would look like. But we've been talking about vehicle to grid, and on the screen is a diagram that this is Sid from, Sid is Wannabe Futurist. His Twitter is linked, in the description, the video description below. He gave me this image to put up to sort of give some visual perspective on what his view is on vehicle to grid. So we just talked about mission. The next pillar in your image is stakeholder theory. So we have people who own cars, people who work for Tesla. We have shareholders. Who are the stakeholders who benefit most from vehicle to grid?
Okay, so the stakeholders outside the conventional understanding of shareholders are basically local communities and cities, right? The way our utility companies work, and I'm not a utility expert, but so please forgive me for errors and nuances that I may or may not commit to. So the way our grids work right now, US has, I believe, 3 grids or 5 grids that supports the power infrastructure in the US, and cities there are a collection of cities that receive energy from various utility companies. 3 or 4 cities, for example, PG&E supplies to the whole of Bay Area, and something else provides electricity to the whole of LA, some other companies. So when there is peak electricity consumption happening in one city, but there isn't peak electricity consumption happening in the nearby city, and I'm using the term city in a loose way, but it depends on the jurisdiction, which is actually responsible for providing the power. Having this leverage of being able to use their own stored energy to power their own city, rather than borrowing the electricity from a nearby city, empowers the community to keep their utility costs.
The vehicle to grid helps balance the load. Exactly what you're saying. So before we go on, I just want to. There were some questions here I want to get to. Ready? On a second. Oh, so there was a question. I had mentioned something that Elon said. I think I mentioned something that Elon didn't say, and people think that Elon tweeted something about vehicle to grid. He did not. Elon did have a tweet where someone was tweeting about vehicle to grid, and he asked, is there much usage of vehicle to grid in Australia? And I don't think he ever answered the question. I suspect he was being sarcastic, that he knew that vehicle to grid is not used much in Australia, and that was his point. But the point that I was making there was he never mentioned vehicle to grid in the Tesla mission statement. He never mentioned it in the Master Plan Part 1 or the Master Plan Part 2. Elon has never talked about vehicle to grid in any meaningful way. And to me, if Elon thought that the vehicle to grid was something special, he would have talked about it, and he hasn't. So I just want to get to these questions just real quick. I like to keep the audience involved. So absolutely, yeah. Kaushik says that your Tesla vehicle has 60 to 75 kilowatts. This is one of the arguments that we'll probably come to, that your Tesla vehicle has more usable energy than a Powerwall. And so he says using the battery capacity to bolster the grid is a great product of battery electric vehicles. So Kaushik, I think we're going to talk about that as we go on.
Definitely.
So
I think I mean, what the way I had in mind was go through each pillar, but I think it's so intermingled that we can jump around. And I think this is a good question. We can jump to this question. So, like, my argument about that was to respond to your question, Warren. That's the stakeholders that are benefiting. So the way I think about stakeholder theory is not that, hey, if a company thinks about stakeholder theory, they're going to be successful. Period. No. The way I think about stakeholder theory is if a company thinks about thinks about how they operate from a stakeholder theory perspective, the odds of failing goes down because you have more people rooting for you. So when you have a city benefiting from a technology, there are more people incentivized to fight for you and maybe make exceptions for your business. So that's the reason why I like to view and judge my companies that I invest in from a stakeholder theory. Like, if the least that I want from a company is like I don't want them to ignore or negatively impact the other stakeholders, the second level stakeholders.
But so to be clear here, it sounds like the stakeholder that benefits from vehicle to grid is the community getting a more reliable grid. It's not so much the people owning the cars. It's not so much Tesla's shareholders. It's that the community that Tesla operates in benefits, and that gives Tesla a better brand. And it's good for the community in general, and it helps Tesla's brand.
I'm saying in addition to Tesla and the owner, it also helps the community. So that aids in in the brand as well as potential political capital. So that was the concept of stakeholder theory. And to answer Kaushik's question, right? I think that's a good point, and maybe you can sort of present your side of the argument. And I think I'm actually aligned with you on that. It's not just the power capacity of a Model 3 or a Model S that you want to use in vehicle to grid, but it's the infrastructure point, right?
Yeah.
Which actually is the bottleneck. So I think I completely agree with you. I think the burden of having an infrastructure, stand up an infrastructure in our cities and in our communities to make vehicle to grid a reality is high. And maybe to a point where it's not feasible, right? And here, this is where I want to talk about platform as a service. I don't think vehicle to grid is a focus of Tesla. I agree with you. But I think it's a missed opportunity by Tesla to not have vehicle to grid as a technology in their battery packs. Because when Apple came up with the App Store, they did not plan on building every single one of their 270,000 apps. They wanted to create a platform which would allow people to figure it out.
Right.
They wanted to make a technology and people can figure it out. Now, vehicle to grid, I think it's safe to say there are at least 100 to 200,000 maniacal fans of Tesla who will invest $5,000 in $5,000 or $10,000 to have their home, vehicle to grid compliant, right? But that's a small number. I'm not going to say that vehicle to grid will happen because Tesla fans are maniacal. But at the same time, in the similar way, if Tesla provides vehicle to grid platform, that opens up opportunities for several use cases, which we don't think, but when we add them up together, matters. Another use case is a city that is extremely city. Let's imagine a city in Norway or Sweden who are extremely obsessed about being carbon neutral or actually carbon negative, right? They may even have enough political will. They may muster enough political will to actually subsidize the installments of this infrastructure at homes, at parking lots in offices, and at parking lots in other shopping malls, etc.
Yeah, I agree with that. From what I've read about vehicle to grid in the past, a lot of vehicle to grid installations started with a subsidy to the homeowner. And just to be clear, I think house to grid could make sense if you had solar on your roof and you had power walls in your house. And if your house was already wired for house to grid, then maybe plugging the vehicle in as an additional battery support for the grid would make some sense. I still don't think it makes a lot of sense. And my take, Kaushik, on the value of your batteries to your vehicle as a vehicle. Let's say you take one battery cycle on your vehicle. Your vehicle has, let's say, a 300-mile range. So one cycle of the battery is 300 miles. Well, what's the value of 300 miles? call it 50 cents a mile. In the United States, is 60 cents a mile roughly. Well, 50 cents a mile times 300 miles is $150. Well, what's the value of that cycle in uploading to the grid? Well, you're talking about, let's say, 50 kilowatt hours. If you upload 50 kilowatt hours to the grid at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, it's $1.50.
Come on, 3 cents? Wait, average power is at least 8 to 20 cents.
Well, that's what the utility charges the consumer. That's not what you're getting as the supplier. Natural gas plants are getting like 3 cents a kilowatt hour. But even if it was 10 cents a kilowatt hour, if you're getting 10 cents a kilowatt hour times 50 kilowatt hours, it's $5 versus $150 in driving. So
I think
this is one of my biggest points here, is that the value of that battery cycle in driving is far exceeds the value in vehicle to grid. But go ahead, sorry.
Oh yeah. But I think we ought to be a little careful in how we use the dollar per kilowatt hour number in this calculation, because you're right. On an average, that's what we see. But during peak hours, those numbers could be really high, the value of a kilowatt hour that you send back to the grid could be really high during a peak hour.
But when is the peak hours are late afternoon, and late afternoon is when you're probably driving the car.
I love it.
The peak availability for the vehicle is in the middle of the night when there's no demand.
Yeah. So I like that point, and I like that point because that enables me to talk about a little bit more about platform as a service and the consumer mentality, right? So last thing that I wanted to mention as platform as a service. So we get the idea of platform as a service. You create an ecosystem, people will do whatever they want to do with it. And as long as there's a possibility, people will try to make it economical. So I see there are several applications for platform as a service. As much as we think we are evolving as a society to a shared economy, I think we are far ways culturally to be able to purely live in a completely shared economy. And I am a very, very practical person, or at least I would like to believe so. But I cannot imagine, having a car that will be used as a robotaxi, and I will be using it for my family as well in the future. So I have.
Why is that? Let's talk about that.
I have 5 Cybertrucks.
Why is it that you wouldn't want your vehicle used as a robot? I hear that all the time. Why wouldn't you want your vehicle used as a robotaxi? There's all kinds of people who are using their vehicles as Ubers and Lyfts.
Yeah. I think I'm thinking which podcast it was. Yeah, I think it was with Lex Fridman. Elon makes a really good point. We're still essentially working on monkey brains, and that's his impetus to get the new.
That was Joe Rogan. The monkey brain is Joe Rogan.
Was it? No, I think he was talking about Neuralink with.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, I think humans are extremely inefficient thinkers. Yeah. We just do moronic stuff. Like we preach efficiency, we preach logic. And then we end up doing something stupid. We know we're not supposed to eat that cookie, but we're going to do it anyway. We just can't help ourselves. So I come from a culture where we request our guests to take out their shoes before we enter a house. Are you going to really believe that people like me and people who come from my culture, are going to let strangers sit in a car? And this is it's just an example.
Oh, wait. I'm guessing you're from somewhere in South Asia, your culture.
Yeah, I'm Indian. Absolutely.
And I've been in places where taxi drivers are often from South Asia.
Yeah,
so they're driving vehicles with people in the back who are not their family. And I'll be plain and simple. I agree with you that there's cultural obstacles to overcome. But my plan, I have a Cybertruck on order. I'm at one of the earliest reservations. Dual motor.
By the way, dual
motor. Nice. And my plan is, when I'm not driving, I wake up in the morning. If I'm not going anywhere, I look at my phone and I press the "Go Make Me Money" button, and my Cybertruck goes out and makes me money. And I appreciate the cultural obstacle if it wasn't a lot of money. But if that vehicle, if that vehicle goes out and it drives 200 miles that day, and it makes $1 a mile, it may be $200. That's over $1,000 a week. I can overcome my cultural obstacles if it's going to pay me $1,000 a week.
Yeah, I think you can, but And I don't like that's why my Twitter handle is Wannabe Futurist, because I don't think anyone is a brilliant futurist, because people evolve in a completely unpredictable ways. I don't know how society is going to evolve, but in 2009, when Airbnb came, I was like, oh man, this is going to completely change home ownership. But I have people from my peer group who would never even consider having a room out for Airbnb. It's just like nada. This is not even a consideration. It's even if they are at home, even if they're not at home, they would never ever consider a stranger using their room. And they will say, yes, it is stupid, but I will never. It doesn't make sense to me, So that is it's. I don't know how we as a society are going to evolve. Maybe we are going to see the practicality of it. But even if that happens, I think there will be enough population that will still have that mental block. And again, it's having a platform and allowing people with all kinds of mental quirks to be able to make what they want to make out of it. And to kind of counter that, your use case of you have a Cybertruck on order, I'll raise the stakes for you. I have 4 Cybertrucks on order, and I have a Model Y on order. I have not taken delivery because I live in New York, and it's just absolute waste of resources for me to have a car. But the idea is I will have my Model Y, and all the 3 or 4 depends on how much I'll fall in love with the tri-motor. They are going to be robotaxis, and I will not let my future kids or dog or wife to ever get into that Cybertruck. I will make sure my customers are happy, and I will have professional cleaning crew that makes sure that it's a hygienic vehicle of transportation. But I can never see myself using that. Oh, kids, let's go on a road trip to Banff. Let's take one of the Cybertrucks. No, okay, let's take the tri-motor, which is actually Daddy's Cybertruck. I can never see myself using that every other vehicle that I have for personal use.
So, okay, well, I think we've gone off. Let's get back to vehicle to grid and just close up that a little bit. So just to follow up for people, excuse me. My position is that vehicle to grid won't happen because forgetting about robotaxi for a second, forgetting about the value of its used vehicles, the cost of setting up, I want to make an exception here. If you have solar and Powerwall on your house and your house is already wired to supply energy to the grid, and it's conceivable to me that then there's very little cost to plugging your Tesla into your Powerwall and supplying additional power to the grid, having additional battery available to the grid. I think the problem there is the Powerwall is already covering it, and I don't know how much more you're adding with your Tesla battery, but okay, it's there. And the value of a Tesla in vehicle to house, that if your electricity goes down and your power walls and your solar back to supply energy, having your Tesla as additional backup energy makes a lot of sense in that crisis consequence. But for people who don't already have the connection to feed their energy up into the grid, the cost of equipping it for that is a ballpark of $5,000. And if your vehicle to grid connection is going to make you $2,000 a year, or let's say $1,000 a year, well, it takes too long. What's it called? Return on investment. The return on investment, and especially when then you consider what's that battery cycle worth to vehicle use, even if it's not robotaxi. I just don't think the economics work. We're going to move on to the next topic, and Ken asked if we're going to talk about asteroid mining. We're going to talk about mining next. Since you asked, Ken, we'll add asteroid mining to the topic. And then after that, we're going to talk about racing, and in particular, racing autonomous vehicles. So, and this is Sid, by the way. Sorry, this is Sid, who is Wannabe Futurist on Twitter. We are talking about vehicle to grid now. Next, we'll be talking about mining, including asteroid mining now. And then we'll be talking about, already forgot what the third thing was. Autonomous racing. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and there's links below to some videos that are relevant. So take a look. So Sid, what's your last pitch for why vehicle to grid makes sense?
Yeah. So I think the last pitch would be as follows. I think the difference in what you and I are thinking about vehicle to grid is very little. And the difference is, I think, the power of use cases where vehicle to grid is meaningful. I think you believe that it is negligible, and I think what I believe that it is a minority, but it is not negligible. And I'll give you just 2 use cases, and I think I'll present my case, right? We've talked about we've jumped around the use cases, but I'm thinking about myself. Like I talked about, I intend to have, when autonomous vehicles happen, I intend to have uh, I intend to have a bunch of Cybertrucks. One of them will be mine. I will never give it out as a autonomous taxi, and the other ones can make money. And that is in the world where autonomous vehicles happen. If autonomous vehicles don't happen, then I will still want to have a car because I work from home now. I wanted to be able to freaking make money all the time, but I'll still have the car to take my road trips. That's use case number one. Use case number two, again, in the world where autonomous has not happened yet, is manufacturing companies. Manufacturing companies have their fleets sized for winters or holiday times because production levels, demand is really high.
That's a good use case scenario. I like it. I see where you're going.
And they have a lot of trucks. I worked as an intern for 6 months in a manufacturing plant, and a lot of times we had, at least in some of the most odds, like March and April, which is middle of nowhere for e-commerce. There's so many trucks just lying around sitting doing nothing. And now I believe in the future, more and more companies are going to install infrastructure like Megapacks in their backyard. Like a manufacturing plant is going to have a freaking Megapack because they don't have to pay, because they have machines running all 24/7. And on the peak times, they're going to use their own electricity. And that is a perfect example where they already have the infrastructure available. And in March and April, their trucks are sitting doing nothing, and they'll plug the trucks to the infrastructure they have installed. And secondly, like supply chain is just so complicated that sometimes even in peak demand, even with the most advanced predictive analytics, they always have issues when the driver comes into the manufacturing plant and the inventory is not ready for it. So he stays in the parking lot for like 16 hours doing nothing and get paid. But now he can act, the plant can actually make money by plugging the truck to the grid. So these are a couple of use cases that I want to say are going to be part of this minority and not negligible. So I think the difference is you think it's going to be negligible, and I think the difference is that it's going to be a minority. So it'll still happen. And it's just a platform that Tesla just could provide, and society decides how they want to use it.
So for those who are watching, if you want to see more about what I say about vehicle to grid, check the links in the description below. I have 2 videos, including JB Straubel, who was at the time Chief Technology Officer for Tesla, and I believe a co-founder, who said, we're not doing vehicle to grid. And it's not, he didn't say it in those words, but he said it. So we're going to move on to mining, and Ken asked us about asteroid mining. So you did some work related to mining, and Elon specific. I want to talk about mining because Elon in the quarter 2 investor quarterly report, he said, please mine more nickel. So we know that they use nickel, cobalt, aluminum batteries in Teslas now. We believe they're using some other variation of nickel based batteries. I think nickel is a primary component in a lot of batteries, and I think that was a signal that whatever the advanced battery technology they're going to be covering in Battery Day, they're going to be disclosing in Battery Day, it uses nickel. So
I think
what's your take on the prospects of mining nickel, of more nickel being mined in the near term and the long term, and what other mining issues are there to support batteries and other issues related to Tesla?
I'm going to keep my commentary on nickel's role a little bit. I'm going to limit it because I'm not a battery expert, and because that is the core of the argument to predict how the nickel mining is going to be, right? So I'm going to keep that. I think Elon's a perfect marketeer. I mean, he's basically signaling to people that, look, don't worry about future demand. We have all the demand in the world. I think that's a brilliant call. But I also think it's a little bit of a head fake. I think he's making world pay attention to nickel. And my belief on why I think it's a head fake is a great discussion Gali had with Vivas.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Lithium is abundant, and I think Elon is screwing with people. I think he's like,
he does that.
Yeah, there's so much. I think lithium is everywhere. Yeah, sure, lithium is everywhere, but a lot of things are everywhere. What makes them unfeasible is the process of extracting it and making it feasible so that you can have enough in the products that you produce. And the conversation between Vivas and Gali was extremely insightful, and the case for the glut in lithium, I think, is pretty obvious. So I have a feel like it's a little bit of a conspiratorial theory that Elon's like trying to make sure people think that, oh, lithium's okay, lithium's everywhere, and it kind of is everywhere, but extracting it is not easy. So that's how I feel about lithium nickel resource constraint. I think all these resources, all the raw materials are going to be a bit of a resource constraint. And currently, I feel like Elon is trying to get into trying to secure lithium, because I feel like lithium is going to be, no matter what anode and cathode chemistry you're going to use, I feel like lithium is more fundamental than other metals in the battery pack in the cell technology.
Okay.
But going to the mining discussion, man, first time I ever heard Elon said we may go into the mining, I think it was a year ago in one of the earnings calls.
Yes, he did say it.
I freaked out because I come from mining. Mining is extremely slow industry. It's all the things that we in Tesla community talk about, traditional auto ICE vehicles, multiply that by 10 times. They are extremely slow. The way they track their progress is they still use Excel for a lot of their tools. The way they track their operations and maintenance records is extremely ancient. Most of it is in pen and pencil. So my initial reaction to Elon was, to Elon's comment that he wants to get into mining, was extremely nervous. Like, okay, the kind of lethargy and ancient operation style that I've seen in mining, it's kind of scared me as an investor. Like, no, I don't want Tesla to get into mining.
Let me ask you about that. You know, what I see as one of Elon's core values is, if he's going to get into a business, whatever he's going to do has to be an order of magnitude improvement over what's already happening. And your description of the current state of the mining industry is something that has a lot of room for improvement. And it might be possible to attain an order of magnitude improvement. And then the point is, if you're just getting a 10% improvement on what's being done now, it's hard to overcome the barriers to entry and other barriers to operating in that industry. But if you can leapfrog everyone and improve productivity by 1,000%, an order of magnitude improvement, not just 100%, but 1,000% or 900% or whatever, however you do the math on that, if you're able to make that kind of huge difference, then it makes sense to jump into that business. And given that it is a core need for Tesla's mission to build more batteries, and you need more lithium, and you need more nickel, and we don't know what other elements that are needed. Iron. I think like iron for lithium iron phosphate is not a challenge. I don't think the phosphate's a challenge for those batteries. Manganese, cobalt, those are real challenges. So, I thought it made sense if he's able to make that order of magnitude improvement. Are you saying? What do you think about that? You're saying that they're outdated. Wouldn't that mean there's room for Tesla to make a huge improvement?
There is. And so just to backtrack a little bit, my experience in mining is more with my transporting mining material from point A to point B. Like traditionally, we use trains and trucks, which is extremely harmful for the environment because we destroy cities and towns in the way, because mines are all over the world, right? Like, but we need to usually take it from the mine location to a port where we process it. Typically, our mining companies process it near the port and put it on barges and ships and transport it across the world. And my company, the work I did was more with transportation. So we built pipelines to be able to mine the mud or slurry in a very efficient way, provided obviously you make sure that you're maintaining the pipeline really well. And if you maintain the pipeline very well, actually that is the most sustainable way of transporting mined material. The problem is companies get greedy, they don't shut down for maintenance, and then all the hell breaks loose. So yes, I agree. If Elon and Tesla, if they are able to solve the problem, inefficiencies in mining from a first principle perspective, and by that what I mean is I think the calculations of orders of magnitude of improvement will come from, okay, how can we extract a molecule of lithium or cobalt or nickel in the most efficient way from the mud that we have to a brick of or a rock of raw metal. What is the most efficient way of bringing those molecules in from a pile of mud into a crude metal or a refined metal? I think if they can break that, I think absolutely by all means get into mining. But I feel like they are also constrained by some laws of physical chemistry.
Well, it's like
you have to go through certain reactions, or certain treatments to get to it. Again, I'm not a chemistry expert, but if Tesla and the team can figure that out, absolutely, by all means, I think they should get it.
Just as an example, you mentioned using pipelines instead of trains. Well, Tesla's got connections to a company that's pretty good at making pipes.
Yeah.
The tunnel.
No.
The boring company can
100%.
make tunnels. You could use the boring. That's actually a question I want to ask you because I don't know the answer to this, and I don't think I asked the Boring Revolution, one of my favorite channel about the Boring Company. Could the Boring Company's tunnel boring machine be used for mining? Could they be literally used to dig down into ground and bring up stuff? And would that be a productive way of mining, or is mining work differently than that? I think mining works differently, and that's why I think it might not be.
Yeah, I think it's Boring Company is an extremely efficient tunneling technology, not necessarily a mining technology. Like for mining, you literally have to go to a certain depth, and you need to be able to blast surface and put it in a truck and bring out. I find it really hard to imagine a scenario where we can dig a tunnel to that mine source, which is probably like 500 meters below the ground level, and autonomously explode shit and put it in a bucket and like bring it back up. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just having trouble envisioning.
So just be clear, you're saying that the tunnel boring machine wouldn't be able to bore through the metal. You'd have to use explosives to fracture the metal in order to be able to get it out.
No, I am saying I think the reason why Boring Company, again, I'm not an expert in that, but I think the reason why Boring Tunnel, out of many other reasons, reason why Boring Tunnel has become efficient is because of the size as well.
Okay, so just
to
be quick, Jim Whitehead said something I was thinking, and I didn't put it together in my head well enough to say it the way he said it. The problem with tunnels is they are straight, but mining requires you to follow where the veins run.
Exactly.
The material you're mining is not in a straight line. You don't just follow the straight line to bring the material up. I think that's a pretty good point. Now let's turn this.
But there are some mines where it's concentrated, but like you said, it's again, I can't imagine how the whole exploding and putting it into a vehicle to bring back can happen through a tunnel.
Right,
that's my.
If Tesla could come up with a 3x improvement in extraction and a 3x improvement in processing and a 3x improvement in transport, that would be a 9x or basically an order of magnitude in the mining process. And if they are outdated in how they do things, then there's a lot of potential there. Between Tesla and the Boring Company, it seems like there's a lot of potential there. Let's turn this to a more interesting topic. And just a disclosure, my next video is going to be about space mining. So when Ken asked this question, I've started working on a video about space mining, and I think I'm going to have that this week. I think there's some serious problems with space mining. Like there's this idea you're going to go to an asteroid. I think the latest one was the asteroid Psyche. That we're going to go to Psyche, and we're going to Tesla or SpaceX is going to send rockets to Psyche, and they're going to mine gold and bring it back. And there's some ways that makes a lot of sense, and some ways that it doesn't. So my question is, what do you know about? Would it be difficult to implement mining technology on the moon, Mars, or an asteroid? What are the challenges? Because I would think the biggest problem is energy. Where are you getting the energy in order to do the mining? What do you think about that prospect?
I think more than the energy, I'm thinking about the payload that we require, that we will need, the payload capabilities that we'll need in the vehicles that go to these asteroids to be able to install the mining equipment. Obviously, you can take parts and assemble it there, but I still think it's like heavy payloads. Like you probably need to take at least a truck, and these trucks, mining trucks, are really massive. They make the freight trucks look like like dwarves.
Let me be clear about this. My vision for this is, I'll give away a little bit of the video, is that SpaceX launches a Starship that's going to be going to wherever it's going to be mining, whether it's the moon, Mars, or an asteroid. And then 4 or 5 refueling flights come up to fill the tank on the main ship that's going to be transporting whatever it is to the mining destination, the mining location. It should be able to carry a payload of 100 tons. My picture is that a Starship will carry 100 tons to the destination, and once you've started mining, it will be able to bring 100 tons back. That's a ballpark. So I don't know if 100. I don't know how many trips it takes to bring 100 tons, to bring enough mining equipment to mine effectively. I lean towards, I'm just giving away too much of my video, but there's not that many people watching, so it's okay. We're approaching 100 viewers right now. The moon is the easiest to mine because it's there, close. Mars is much farther. The asteroid belt is even farther, and then with the moon and Mars, at least you have small gravity wells, which is, you have some gravity well you have to overcome, but it's also probably easier to operate where you have a gravity well, where you have some material gravity. Mining Psyche, there's so little gravity, I would think that poses its own set of challenges. So I do think there's enough payload to get your mining equipment there in 1 or 2 launches, and because Starship is such a cost-effective platform, you're able to do that for a fairly low cost. So just in terms of the practicality of mining, Jim Whitehead says the moon is full of valuable metals near the surface. I don't know how much we know about that, Jim. How do we know that? If you have thoughts on how we know that, please let me know. But what are the practicalities when you're doing mining? How would you mine from an asteroid? It just seems like that would be a really difficult process.
Yeah, the way I'm thinking about, like, I haven't done a lot of thinking. I guess we're trying to respond to the question, but from a business perspective, I would see this as an experiment that's worthwhile in investing, so that you're ready as a civilization to economically mine it in the future. Like, just like a company should not sit quiet, right? They all sit quiet on their laurels. We have to invest in the newer technology so that we are ready when the resources that we use day to day are depleted. So I think obviously the focus should be in trying to use free market tools to drive competition and innovation in the mining industry in our planet right now, because I think it's very inefficient. So, and by incentivizing lithium mines and nickel mines, but I think it's a worthwhile exercise to be ready, just like Elon and team, Tesla and team were investing in lithium technology 12 years ago.
Well,
I think it's a worthwhile investment.
Let me make the economic pitch, and it's not about lithium or nickel, because I think if you mine materials that are not that expensive on Earth, you would mine them for use in space. And that's a different topic that I will talk about in the video. But
I thought we were talking about EV vehicles.
Here's the pitch for why you would mine in space. Yeah, no, you're right. I'm not thinking about mining. I think the cost of mining more nickel on Earth is much less than the cost of mining nickel in space. But imagine this. Excuse me. Imagine you were able to get 100 tons of gold from the asteroid Psyche, or from the... Let's use the asteroid Psyche, because that's the hard one, and the one people have been talking about is, trillions of dollars of gold on it. Well, you can't bring the whole asteroid back. That would be very, very challenging. But if you could just bring 100 tons, which is the rough payload of Starship, 100 tons of gold is worth $6 billion with a B. $6 billion. So if it cost you $100 million to launch that one Starship to Psyche and install the mining equipment, and then it cost you another $100 million to go back and get the payload and bring it back, or maybe you could bring it back with that payload.
Wouldn't that also change the supply-demand equation of gold and kind of devalue?
This is the
gold?
point. If it was only 100 tons, no. If you started bringing back, 100 tons a week, then yes. But
so there's like a sweet spot where you can.
The point is just, what's your goal? If your goal is, and by the way, I don't on going down this path, although I could see selling Starships available to carry a mission to someone else. I don't think Elon's mission is to Earth. That's just like people that place a value on gold. It doesn't really have a practical value for anything else. It's just, it's valuable. And then if you were, seriously, if you were able to bring back $6 billion of gold and it only cost you $1 billion to bring it here, You just made
Oh,
$5 billion in profit. You can use that to fund other things. And it's gold and platinum. I actually have a list of metals: gold and platinum, and palladium, and rhodium, and rhenium, and two others, I think, that are particularly valuable in the $1,000 to $2,000 an ounce range. If you're talking about something that's, I think steel is like, steel is much, much less, iron is much, much less valuable per ounce. Nickel is much, much less valuable. There's like a small group of minerals that are tremendously valuable per ounce. So,
that'll be awesome.
So just to be clear to people, I'm not suggesting that they're going to bring back 1 trillion tons of gold and destroy the gold market. I'm saying if you brought back 100 tons of gold, I don't think that would have. It might have a small impact on the market for gold, but I think it would be a very small impact. So if you took $2,000 an ounce gold and you dropped it to $1,800 an ounce, no big deal. You still made a lot of money. It's not going to be enough in one mission, and even 10 missions, it wouldn't be enough to crater the value of gold. And you wouldn't even do silver. Even as valuable as silver is, it's not valuable enough to make this worthwhile. But gold and platinum and palladium are. So, but there's just this practical side of it is, like, I envision it being easiest on the moon, and somebody mentioned that the moon has a lot of potential for a lot of ways. Because we can get to the moon easier and get back to and from the moon. The thing is, if you're looking at an asteroid, right now it might be a 3-month, a 4-month or 5-month journey to get to that asteroid. But 6 months later, it might be a 6-year mission to get to that asteroid because it's on the other side of the sun by the time you get there. The asteroid belt being, for those who don't know, the asteroid belt is further out than Mars, between Mars and Jupiter. And, same thing mining Mars. Mars is far enough. There's these 2-year launch windows when it's efficient to get to Mars, where the moon is right there. So this is a question, if there are valuable resources on the moon is right there. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be close to every time we go, relatively close. That seems to be the most possible. But then you got the problem of you've got to land something on the moon. You've got to position it to do the mining. You've got to get the mine working. But if you're able to, and I think what you said,
you also have
I think what you said, mining the moon to create materials to be used in space makes a lot more sense than mining materials on the moon to bring to Earth. But if as a byproduct of that mining you generate gold and platinum and palladium and rhenium and rhodium and a couple others that are really valuable, and you bring those home to Earth to make some extra money, that's still a good thing. But just practically, what do you think about the prospects of mining the moon? How challenging would that be?
The first thing that I'm thinking about is regulatory issues, like who owns the moon? Like, will Tesla be able to bring in and claim that it's their bounty? I don't know.
Well, who's going to stop them? I mean, who's going to get? Who else is going to get to the moon? You can say you can't do that. Okay, well, how are you going to stop us? We're up there. We're doing it. That's actually, it's kind of like a science fiction thing. Once there's a colony on another planet, then Earth governments don't have a lot of say in what happens on those other planets.
Yeah, but you can always, control the outcome, try to control the outcome by sanctions. Like, if someone's pissed off about one government trying to do it, they always have levers to, So I think it's definitely possible. It's absolutely a scenario that I would love to be alive to see.
Okay.
And I think it's not a problem that can't be solved just because there will be other governments challenging it. I think you can always bring everyone into the loop and the pie gets divided.
You just got to pay off the right people.
Exactly.
So, so let me ask you this question. I want to move on now. So I don't see any questions, and I wanted to move on to the next topic. Have some experience in automotive.
Yes.
We're going on to a very different topic, folks. I think actually possibly the most fascinating topic for me is you have experience in racing. I have this question in my head. They're developing vehicle autonomy. So Tesla Plaid Model S will have full self-driving on it within 6 months. Could Tesla Model S Plaid, the Plaid Model S, be put on Nürburgring without a driver? And how fast would it run without it? Would it run faster because it weighs less because there's no driver in it? Or are human drivers just that much better for now that it still wouldn't be able to compete? Or how long would it take for an autonomous Plaid Model S to go faster than a human-driven Plaid Model S?
I think weight definitely matters. I was a decent driver, but there were definitely much better drivers in my university team. But one of the main reasons I was on the team, despite of not being an exceptional driver, was because of my weight. I was the lightest of the team, and there was value in having me as one of the drivers in a drag situation. Uh, Theoretically, it to me it seems like the car should run significantly faster than any humans. I think the amount of training and the amount of
Hello?
inefficiencies.
Sorry, just testing. Can you guys hear
Yeah,
me? Okay, well, see if the comments go. Go ahead.
I think the amount of inconsistency, not even inefficiency, but inconsistency associated with human driving is at a professional level very negligible, but at the same time it's not non-existent. I think you can squeeze a lot out of like extremely optimal racing. Now, I don't know if a race between a human driver and a car will result in the car beating the human driver when it's happening at this simultaneously, because I think a human can kind of push and scare the autonomous vehicle to take some protective measures, or but on a free lap without any interventions, I don't see why not an autonomous vehicle completely destroying a human. But this is coming from my perspective that I've test driven three Tesla cars so far, and the autonomous is very impressive. But my understanding is that the current full self-driving technology is fairly throttled, and it's intended to be extremely conservative so that we don't have crazy situations on roads. But if that throttle's pulled back, theoretically, I see that it's very possible to completely destroy a human driver's time, but not necessarily like a parallel race, because I think a human can outsmart a machine in trying to scare it away from like braking or trying to be defensive.
Okay, so my take on this is that the biggest challenge for vehicle autonomy is other drivers being in the way, about interacting with pedestrians, exactly, interacting with objects, and if you have a track, and the vehicle knows that there's you're able to limit the number of objects it has to worry about to just other cars. Hey, we've decided there won't be other objects on the road. You shouldn't worry about any of this. Then it can focus on. To me, every time it goes around the track, it learns to drive faster. That's
yeah, and especially if it's a known track, right?
Right.
But I think the true test of the race would be, all right, we teach a Tesla to completely nail it, Nürburgring, completely nail Nürburgring, and it knows every single curve, every single gradient at a turn. It knows everything inside and out. And then the true test would be, then we make changes to the track and then let it race and see how it does, because technically it does still have cameras and it should be able to drive, and it should be able to gauge the gradient in the road. So I think that would be more fun to watch rather than see a Tesla really go fast and really destroy humans' time. I think what would be more fun is, after it does that, now let's see how it does on a new racetrack somewhere else, right, against a human. I think that'll be more fun.
I just picture. I mean, there's two things that I picture. One is just there's this popular question about what's the fastest vehicle on the Nürburgring, and I think that Plaid Model S is going to wreck the Nürburgring soon, and then
wow,
the idea
that'll be a sight to watch.
And then at some point, Tesla's going to say, we really want to show off robotaxi or full self-driving. We're going to put a Plaid Model S on the Nürburgring with no human driver, and let's see how amazing that is. And I think I figured out what's.
That'll be a really cool marketing event, I think.
I think I'm just playing with my audio filters to see if I can get the sound better. So I think that's the real amazing moment, is if Tesla is able to put a Plaid Model S or a Roadster on the Nürburgring, and it gets the best time ever on the Nürburgring and not by a little, that's like a throwdown. And then the second thing is, could you have autonomous vehicles racing against human drivers, or could you have a fleet of autonomous vehicles racing against each other? And that could be kind of interesting. Is, let's say you let Waymo and Tesla and Zoox and whoever else, and Comma.ai, and they're all running vehicles autonomously, and you have a race where they compete against each other. That could be kind of cool too. And then you know, the nice thing about autonomous racing is no one dies. You know, because no one gets injured. So I think, but I do think that's one of the ways that we overcome resistance to robotaxi. Because people say, "Oh, I would never ride in a robotaxi. I wouldn't trust a robotaxi to be on the road with me and my children." If you were able to do, Chris, the SpaceX package, I'm not even getting into that, but if people were able to see autonomous vehicle racing where they're literally racing against each other, you know, close matches, and they're coming close to each other, and they're going 200 miles an hour on a Grand Prix track, I do think that's a big marketing pitch for a vehicle autonomy.
I think it's a really great eyeball grabber, but I think the ultimate smackdown, it's just end of story. You know, let's just do this. Let's regulate and open up autonomous. Would be if Elon and team can send a car from LA to New York all by itself. I think that is going to be the ultimate marketing or smackdown that you need. But it's a little bit of a pessimistic view from my perspective. But the way I see, unfortunately, happening, given the cultural experiences that I've had, unfortunately, I think that the biggest catalyst or impetus for US to accept autonomous is going to be when China accepts autonomous. I think it's going to be like a space race. I think people are very individualistic in the States, and they love their cars. And I've talked with people who have ridiculously high amount of inhibitions to even allow cruise control when they're driving, even when they know that they can completely, they just slam the brake and cruise control's off. There's severe inhibitions. But I think things change, and the equation and the perceptions change when we know that, hey, China is like, people are commuting to work in autonomous taxis. I think that's when US comes into life, usually when there's a competition and when there's a desire to prove ourselves that we're better. I kind of feel, unfortunately, that that's going to be happening.
I think the practical side is, I live in Florida, and Florida already has a law allowing autonomous vehicles when they're ready. And Florida is a tourist destination. World, Miami Beach, we have beaches all over the place. If Tesla starts robotaxis in a place like Florida, and people like it, which I think people will for various reasons, the tourists will come and they will experience it, and they will want it at home. This is what happened with Uber. Uber started in a few places, and then people used it and like, wow, this is awesome. I want this. I want this where I live. And then there's that order of magnitude issue, by the way, that Uber and Lyft are great, but they're not an order of magnitude improvement over taxis and other options. And so the establishment players kept throwing up and continue to throw up obstacles to Uber and Lyft. Most currently in California, they're getting really handicapped by rules on employment.
Right.
And so, there were places like, I live in Palm Beach County, Broward County did not allow Uber for a while there. I think the Florida Keys, I'm not sure if they allow the Uber right now, which is stupid because we know that Uber and Lyft actually prevent drunk driving. It literally saves lives, and they're going against it because their special interest taxi cab companies are telling them not to allow it. So the robotaxi is an order of magnitude improvement, and that is such an improvement that it overcomes the institutional obstacles to things happening. So I think once people see robotaxi and they fly into the Palm Beach airport or the Miami airport, and they take a robotaxi ride, and it gets them from point A to point B for less than half the money an Uber would have cost them, and it's easier than any other way, then they're going to say, wait, why don't I have this at JFK Airport? Why don't I have this at LAX? Why don't I have this at Newark? And that's when it accelerates. And that's when the people who say, hey, I want this, start putting pressure on their local politicians saying, hey, you could make my life better if you did this. I'm not saying that our democracy is that good at that. But that's why you need the order of magnitude improvement.
Yeah, 100%.
So let me just look to see if there's any relevant questions we can with. I think I'm kind of out of steam. Do you have anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up? I want to thank everybody for watching. Anything else on your mind, Sid? Sid?
No,
This is Sid from Wannabe Futurist. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please check the links below. I'll add some links later for some of the other topics, but my video's on vehicle to grid. Follow Sid on Twitter at Wannabe Futurist. Anything else on your mind, Sid?
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up and say, share a thought with our Tesla community. I absolutely love Tesla community, and it was just a thought that I got a couple of days ago, and wanted to share it when I have that opportunity. I think it's a great idea that we are so passionate about sustainable living, Tesla and Tesla's mission, sustainable energy, and all that concepts. But I think we end up sharing the content with the same people who are already convinced. So I would encourage people to also obsess about one or two other topics, so that we are able to sneak into a couple of other areas and bring more people. So I've been conscious about that. I've been trying to figure out what those other areas for myself are, so that, so that I can gain a little bit of a following and a little bit of a hearing ear in on other topics, and people that appreciate my commentary, and then bam.
Okay. That's a good point. So I share, I think my gain is too high on my microphone is the problem there. So I thought it was low before, but delete that. Okay. So, I have friends on Facebook, and I'm always sharing stuff on Facebook with my friends. So that's one angle, is just telling you, like my friends are like sick of me being the Elon Musk fanboy, SpaceX, Tesla nut. But better than when they hear my political views. So that's something. But I think you make an interesting point that we should look for relevant groups that interest us, that we can sort of make the connection and say, hey, that's really interesting. Did you know Tesla was doing something about that? Hey, that's really interesting. Did you know SpaceX or Neuralink or the Boring Company are pursuing that? So, it's a good question. What are some other topics that are at least loosely related that would make sense for people? What groups are you on, or what topics are you following that are closely related?
I actually think it's the opposite. I think it should not be. It should be completely disconnected.
Oh,
so
not related.
I'm trying.
Okay.
There are certain topics that I'm playing with a little bit. Investing is one of them, but again, it's kind of loosely connected with Tesla, because everybody wants to invest in Tesla. So that's been a dud. But other topics, I am very passionate about evolution and evolutionary psychology.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been trying to follow people and engage in that realm a little bit, and not sound like an idiot, make meaningful commentary and gain enough attention with people who talk about evolution, evolutionary psychology. And I also like sustainable agriculture. I think the sustainable part is common, but at the same time, I think agro world and food lovers are a completely different breed than Tesla lovers. So these are a couple of areas that I've been testing out, experimenting a little bit.
There is actually an interesting connection when you get into food, which is Kimball Musk.
That's right, with Kimball. Yeah.
Kimball Musk has a couple startups that are related to the food industry. Boring Company and VGAD will help change. I don't know what you mean, vegan? I don't know what that means. That's a comment from Ben Pena. Just going to screw up the cost for you. Cab company. I'm just looking at the comments to see if there's anything else. Price must go down the drain. Tesla could do teleoperated taxis. That's an interesting idea, Jim. There's some talk about people doing Teslas, like a ride-sharing network where Tesla owners drive them. I think Jim Whitehead's point about, I think there's a half step between full autonomy when the vehicle says I need help, and you have a network of operators who are following, they're watching 10 vehicles. And when the vehicle says I need help, it says an alert and it pops up on the guy's screen, and the guy can help the vehicle operate. I think that's an interesting prospect, Jim. I love that idea. So listen, Sid, Wannabe Futurist, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed, thank you everyone for watching. I've really enjoyed this. I'm afraid that I'm out of juice. I managed it.
No, it's all good.
Managed an hour, and hopefully we'll do this again soon. Thanks everyone for watching. And I'm going to stay on, Sid.
Yeah.
So I'm ending the stream.